Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lynette Elliott. We would like to thank you all for joining us today for a reorientation and a data element submission web tool overview. We appreciate you all being here, and we will go through some quick administrative items before we get into the rest of our meeting. Next slide, please. We do record these calls, so to cut down on background noise, you are all currently on mute, but if you have attended before, you'll know that we will open it up for questions twice during the meeting generally. So if you have any other questions in the meantime, you can use your chat feature. And if you send a chat, please send it to everyone. My team does monitor these behind the scenes, and we do our best to catch and address everything that comes across during the meeting so that we can all have an open conversation. If you have any difficulties, technical or otherwise, please do email me, lynette.elliott@emiadvisors.net. Next slide, please. You've all seen this slide before, and we will encourage you, if you have not already done so, to officially join the project by becoming a committed member or an other interested party. We use that list to reach out to all of you via email so that we can send you meeting updates. And for instance, we have issued the end-to-end review. We emailed all of you on Friday and then again on Tuesday with a reminder. If you did not receive that email, it probably indicates that you have not registered as a member. So you can do that on the wiki. Also, if you want to look at your member status, if you want to change it at all, you can look at that on the Join page as well. And then for other project information, you can go to the home page, and all these links are live. And we will provide a link to this presentation after the meeting, like we usually do. We post these on the wiki. Next slide, please. Our agenda for today is to go over the schedule. We've made some updates, the end-to-end comment period for the use case package, and the consensus voting process, which will be coming up shortly. I will walk you through those. And then Laura Gottlieb from Siren will be providing a reorientation to the Gravity project goals and our forward momentum and next steps for that. Then Lisa Nelson will take us through the Social Determinants of Health Data Element Submission tool. We have a new online tool to introduce to all of you. And then Evelyn will walk you through end-to-end use case comment dispositions to date. We are currently still receiving comments. The period is open through tomorrow. Evelyn, if you can jump to that slide again. Thank you. The comment period is open. Oops, back up there. There you go. Comment period is open through tomorrow, close of business, which would be 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. So we are currently consolidating comments that we're receiving. She'll go through some of those, and then we'll go through next steps, and we will adjourn. Next slide, please. All right, we hope that all of you had a wonderful and relaxing Independence Day holiday with friends and family. We're glad to have you all back. We are on week 11 today, on July 11, and we are 1 week away from the official food insecurity domain kickoff. So for today, our focus will be to prepare us for the next leg of that work, which will be defining a food insecurity data set. Laura is going to spend a few minutes reorienting us, and then she will hand over the call to Lisa to walk through a new web-based tool that we've developed to streamline the data elements submission process, should any of you wish to go ahead and submit data elements, either for the food insecurity domain or for the two upcoming domains, housing and transportation. And then next week, we will also publish a final use case with the comments consolidated and addressed for all committed members to vote on, and I will explain that process in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of our schedule for July, the rest of July, and August, and we've walked through these tasks in our past meetings, so the slide may look familiar, but you will see that we have added a final date for food insecurity data elements to be submitted, and that's by August 1st. And that is so those can be included in those upcoming discussions on August 8th, August 15th, and August 22nd. As a reminder, we are scheduled to discuss those things through August 22nd, and then we'll move into our next domain, which is housing instability. And each of these domain data sets will include that end-to-end review and consensus voting process, as we're currently doing for the use case. So that process will become a very familiar process, hopefully, by the end of the project. Next slide, please. And please forgive us if our transitions are slow. Evelyn is experiencing a thunderstorm in her area, and she's driving my slides. What do we mean by end-to-end review? And again, you have until tomorrow, close of business. And I will preface this by saying, if any of you feel you need more time and would like to go ahead and submit comments, but you're crunching, please do email me, lynette.elliott@emiadvisors.net, and we will work with you behind the scenes. But we had set the date as July 12. We are aware that there have been some issues with the wiki and with this process. Again, if you continue having those issues, please do reach out to me personally, lynette.elliott, so we can address those with you directly. And we can circle in our tech support at HL7 as well. Also, we wanted to remind you, if you have not, if this seems new to you and you are a registered member, please check your email, your junk filters, and your spam filters to see if you've received the information for this from us. We have sent out 2 emails. Last Friday, we published the full use case package for Gravity participants to review and comment on. And it's the first time we've asked you all to review a document in its entirety, so we know this process is new. But the instructions for how to review and how to sign up for an HL7 Confluence account, if you don't already have one, were included in that email. Again, if you did not receive it, please reach out to me. All Gravity participants can submit comments as part of this review. You do not have to be a registered member. So please feel free to provide input if you've even just been listening in on these calls or just tracking the progress of our discussions on the use case. And again, the close of this is tomorrow, close of business on the West Coast. And depending on the number of comments we receive, we will start the use case consensus voting either next Monday or Tuesday. It's looking like it may be Tuesday, just based on some of the comments that we're receiving and anticipate receiving tomorrow. And then Evelyn is going to spend a few minutes today highlighting the dispositions for some of those comments that we've already been able to review and depose. She'll do that later in the call. Next slide, please. Then following the end-to-end review that's due, we will consolidate all of those comments, we will depose all of them, and we'll publish the final use case document for consensus voting. And that process is defined on our wiki. You can see that link here. There is a specific formal process for it. And this is typically a process that many, many organizations follow to approve documentation. And what we'll do is we'll ask all of you to sign up either as a committed member or other interested party, but only committed members can vote. So if you are currently an other interested party or unregistered, you can update your membership by emailing us. You can just make that request and we will help you with that. Votes are in 4 different categories. You can vote yes, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's perfect or that it's an ideal, but it's better to move forward than to block the deliverable. Yes with comments means yes, and you can include comments for consideration. Perhaps there are updates that you feel should be made so that it would be a yes for you. You can formally object, and we would ask that you include comments that indicate a path to address that objection or a way that meets known concerns of possibly other members on the project or issues that you have with the documentation. If you do not include comments with your formal objection, it will be considered to be an abstention. And if you abstain, you're declining to vote. And none of these are negative. They are just means of voting. And we do look for your comments if you have a yes with a comment or a formal objection. And then early next week, we will publish the link to the voting page that will be on the wiki. And we'll send out another email to all registered members. Again, if you are not currently registered and want to receive that email to vote, please do register on the site. And then similar to the end-to-end review process, all of the voting comments will be deposed and those will be used to determine whether significant changes are warranted that need to be made to that document prior to us publishing the final version of it. And at this point, we can open up for questions if anyone has any questions about that complicated process.
Lynette, this is Evelyn.
Yes.
Just check your note to
yes,
unmute Laura now.
Okay, yes. And I'm
sure
seeing a question. Hi, Lucy. Seeing a question. If you need to get the Word document from us, yes, we can send you that. We realize, like I said, there have been some technical issues with the wiki. So, Lucy, I will reach out to you after the call. And if any of the rest of you have experienced the same confusion and frustration, and we apologize for that, we will go ahead and send you that. And again, if you think you need more time, just talk to us. We will work with you. And Laura, I think you're unmuted if you want to try to go ahead and talk. I'm hoping your phone is connected with your login. It doesn't look like it is.
She sent us her phone number, but unfortunately it only says like call and user.
All we see is call and users.
Yeah, we don't see phone numbers, Laura. So I don't know, Laura, if you can hang up and dial in via the login provided by the WebEx.
Yeah, if you can put in that caller ID, it will identify you so we can.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, there you are.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
Great.
Okay.
Confusing. Great. So hi, everybody. I just thought it might be time for a little reorientation after the last couple months of diving deep into use case development, which was part of a very critical foundation for this shared language that we're trying to develop. What Evelyn and Lisa and Lynette and the rest of the EMI team have taken us through are just the normal steps for developing interoperability standards, but admittedly, those steps were very new for me. I know they weren't new for everybody on these calls, but I suspect that for those of you who have a background in social determinants and not in interoperability semantics, they might have been a little confusing at times. The good news is that for those of us on the social determinants side of this journey, the next several months are really a place where we get to get down and dirty into that work. So my job today is just to welcome back folks who may have gotten a wee bit lost in the last few weeks as we went through those very technical and critical steps around the use case, but who still have a strong interest in ensuring that our medical vocabularies are really able to reflect the work that we're doing at the intersection of social and medical care. So just as a refresher, our goal is really, Lynette or Evelyn, if you could advance the slide, is really just to develop consensus on social determinants of health-related concepts and codes with the goal of facilitating data use, sharing, interoperability, and potentially payment related to the activities that we're seeing in clinical settings. So why? Go ahead and advance this slide. Why do we go through this process? Well, just as a reminder from where we were in the kickoff meeting, there has been this, enormous surge in activities around social risk screening and related interventions, in part because of our growing awareness of how social factors shape health outcomes. But in the healthcare setting, in healthcare settings across the U.S., we've just seen so much more social risk screening and related interventions. I inserted a reference here just where we've compiled some of the big national surveys that are showing kind of the prevalence of social risk screening and related interventions in the U.S. healthcare delivery system. And then if you go ahead and advance the slide, the problem that we have is that the documentation on this rapidly increasing set of activities is pretty sparse. So that has limited our ability to share, account for, and even argue for financial reimbursement for social risk screening and interventions. Great. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Here we go. So in part, the lack of documentation is a result of lack of incentives, other requirements to document. But there are also barriers inherent in the medical vocabularies that are available for documentation purposes. So as we mentioned during our kickoff, some existing codes reflect screening, diagnosis, and treatment related to these three big topics that we're covering in the Gravity project, but the available codes are poorly aligned with the social risk topics that we're treating or that we're managing in healthcare settings. So as in this example, we just pulled domains related to food, housing, and transportation from three of the big social risk screening tools that are in use right now in clinical settings. And we found only that the Accountable Health Community's tool for food insecurity questions was actually mappable to existing screening codes in medical vocabularies. So the other screening domains or specific questions were not codable using existing standards. Let's go to the next slide. So another challenge we encountered in the review that we did was that it wasn't just that there were missing codes, but there were overlapping codes. So these were codes where the distinctions were unclear, or it just wasn't altogether straightforward whether these codes were measuring different concepts. So too many overlapping codes can also make it hard to have a standardized way of coding the data unless there are value sets established, things that group similar codes under one category. So our goal in the Gravity project is to address challenges related to both the missing codes and the overlapping codes. Let's go to the next slide and I'll wrap up. So again, developing consensus on related concepts and codes, social determinants of health-related concepts and codes to facilitate data use, sharing, interoperability, and payment. Let's go to the next slide. So what are we going to actually do in the next 5.5 months? We're going to focus specifically on food insecurity, housing instability and quality or conditions, and transportation access. And let's go to the next slide. So in the next 5.5 months, we're going to launch 3 successive subgroups. The first will be on food insecurity, the second on those housing questions, and the third on transportation. And we're gonna try with each of those subgroups to address these 3 questions. What social risk-related clinical activities or data need to be documented, specifically around screening, diagnosis, and treatment of social risk-related activities? And then, do codes already exist to represent those data, or excuse me, those activities or data elements? And then finally, what are meaningful groupings for those data elements? So if you ask about food insecurity and you ask about food insecurity, but we need different codes to capture those different screening questions, how do we group those under some kind of in some kind of similar cluster in order to facilitate data aggregation and sharing? All right, that about wraps it up. Let's go to the last slide of mine. I hope that reorientation is helpful. It was helpful for me, even just to prepare it so that I could ensure that I knew where we have been and where we're going. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. She's going to introduce this new web tool she's designed to make the data element submission easier for all our Gravity participants. And this is really a really critical step for us to gather and review what is currently being documented in the field or needs to be documented in the field to identify synergies and gaps across our different settings. And then remember, after this meeting, which is our last one where we're just sort of really laying the foundation, we're going to reconvene next week to finally dive into the concrete food security focused working group. So thank you for sticking with us thus far, and I'm really excited to get into the weeds in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Laura. This is Evelyn. I am actually now going to hand presenter rights to Lisa to take over to share her screen. Actually, not yet. Lisa, I'm going to prepare this I will hand it over to you to go over this one slide. But before doing so, I do want to acknowledge we did have a question from Andrea in regards to whether we are going to be reaching out, Laura, to your presentation about us looking across all the screening tools, if we're going to reach out to the screening tool developers. So I can start, I can answer and say, I know that several of the screening tool authors or owners are participating in the Gravity project. They're aware that we are looking, we'll be reviewing many of the questions they include in their tools. So we hope as part of the next phase of work, we are going to set up recommendations. So one of just acknowledging again, one of our objectives and deliverables is a set of recommendations that will include, we can acknowledge where these data concepts currently exist. So if they are questions in a specific screening tool, then we can make a request to update it or modify it. So I think this is something that it's ongoing work for us. Laura, unless you have anything else for you to add?
I don't think so. I think that was great.
Okay, great. Thank you. With that, let me hand over to Lisa.
Okay, Evelyn, let's see how I'm doing this now. I think I just share. We get a little extra passing today.
So I'm just showing the adjudication process. So before you show the web tool, if you can spend some time just going through the process of how you and Linda have been working with Sarah and Donna on reviewing the data elements we have today.
I only see EG on the screen. I don't see the PowerPoint presentation anymore. Am I the only one, or?
No, this is Lynette. Evelyn, we don't see your screen. There we go. Okay.
Terrific. Here we go. All right. Thanks, everybody. This is Lisa. I'll start with the next slide. What I'm going to do is I will describe the overall process that we use to collect your input and your submitted forms for the data elements that Laura was just describing, and then I will take over the screen and just remind you of what the steps are and show you the tool that we'll be using. So we'll start with just the background theory. In order to get to this consensus level list of the vocabulary that we need to make sure we have the right codes for, that's this sort of purple block right here, we will go through a process where organizations who have a good sense right now, can you advance back to the slide that, yeah, super, thank you very much. Organizations that have a good sense of what do we need to document today, you can submit those concepts, whether you currently know codes that are associated with them or you don't. We have a group that will be working to adjudicate the information that you submit so that we can go through and make sure we can find codes or identify where codes are overlapping or missing. But if you know what needs to be documented, those are the data elements that need to be submitted in the activities of screening, diagnosis, goal setting, and intervention. Your submission comes into a group of subject matter experts who know the code systems and know the domain, and they will consider each of the concepts, each of the data elements that you've identified as being needed, and respond to that request, deciding if the data element is something that's new and additional and needs to be added to this large master list that we're keeping of all the coded vocabulary that's needed, or if it's something that has been, we've found it already and it's in the master list and it's really a duplication, so we're just bumping up the count of the number of organizations who would like that, or if it's something that's not really relevant to this particular domain but might be needed in the future, et cetera. I'll show you the next slide what all the possibilities are. But basically on a row-by-row basis, each of these submissions will be disposed of, similar to the process that Lynette was describing where we go through each of your comments. Each of your entries will be considered and a disposition will be documented against that, and then this master list will continue to grow as we get more and more submissions. And that's finally what the group will vote on in the end. Next, I guess I can advance this myself now if I'm the presenter, or somebody else. Lynette, you might still have to click the next slide for me. The adjudication process is just looking at each of the data elements that comes in to see if it is a duplication of one that we already have on the master, and we do have some subject matter experts that you'll be introduced to next week who've been working in the background over the past few weeks to compile a starting master list. So we don't really begin with just a blank, empty master list. We've got a good list to bump up against. So your submitted elements could be duplicating concepts that we've identified as needed, or they could be new and will be added to the list as a result of your submitting them. They might not be appropriate for this particular domain that we're focused on right now, food insecurity, but may seem relevant for other domains of social determinants of health. We have a parking lot that we can keep some of those items in, and then we may determine that the element, for some reason, either it's not well formed or it's just too granular or not fit for the purpose, it won't be added to the master. If we have questions, we will get back to you directly. So sometimes we get stuck on one of the rows that you submitted, and we may need to reach out and contact you by email to ask for some additional clarification. But eventually we will resolve anything that is kind of on hold to interact with you, and everything will end up with one of these top 4 dispositions against it. When we get done adjudicating your submission, you'll have that adjudicated version of your submission sheet will be sent back to you so that you have the playbook of your data elements that made it into the master or were considered duplicate, et cetera. You'll have that, and if for some reason you strongly disagree with the disposition that was given, you have the opportunity to have that be reconsidered. Well, it's an open conversation. But that's the process that we basically will be going through in the background. I wanted to show you, now I'm hoping that I do have control over the ability to show my screen. Is that something I can?
Yep, this is Evelyn. Just a second, let me give you presenter rights. Okay, do you have the ball or drag, let me just see.
Let's see.
Lynette, can you take the ball for me and give
Certainly,
it?
yes.
Yeah.
Hang on, let me get into a different view here.
But while we send that over, let's open it up for any questions. I did see,
yes, there was a question about the consensus process. If you saw that one in the chat, Evelyn?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so we, consensus, it means, it's agreement from a majority of the stakeholder groups. And I know, this being an HL7 project, there is actually specific percentage of committed members that have to vote on a particular artifact for it to reach consensus. We don't have, we're gonna, at this point, we haven't made, we don't have specific numbers, but we do want to have a majority of our voters agree and achieve consensus, meaning that there is a yes or yes with comment, so that we can move forward. So right now, again, because we're not, we are an HL7 project, but this is not a standards, we haven't officially moved it under the HL7 process. We do want to just acknowledge that we have a certain percentage of committed members that have achieved consensus on a use case. Any other questions?
Evelyn, this is Lynette. Jenny Harvell is asking, what is the relationship between the scope and focus of the use case and the data elements that are submitted? Are data elements to be considered in this phase limited to concepts that are called out in the use case?
Lisa, do you want me to start?
Yeah, I would say no. They're definitely not limited to just, the patient story that we have is just one example, and, many people contributed other stories that they had in their mind. The use case is primarily to make sure that we can accomplish the sharing that's needed, not necessarily the full vocabulary. So if in the broad space of things that you are doing to assess, diagnose, do planning, set goals, and intervene, either to plan interventions or to complete interventions in this space, all that vocabulary is what we're trying to collect the concepts for. Okay, do you see my screen now?
We do, but we're just seeing the Confluence page.
Confluence page, that's okay. What I wanted to just briefly show so that folks know what I'm about to take you through, all of this is documented when you get to the main Gravity homepage, the data element submission template and instructions area. This is where you have the information about both how to use the old spreadsheet that we originally created, which you can still do if you prefer it, but we also have the instructions for how to use this new web tool that I'm going to show you today. And the instructions explain that the first thing that you do in order to get the tool turned on, you need to send an email to gravitytools@maxm.md with your name and your title and your organization. And I'll be using that information to set you up, and we'll email back to you the link that basically turns on your access to this tool. And once you get in there, I'm going to show you how to use it today. You can complete your submission online. It's a lot easier than using the spreadsheet. And in case you are interested, there also is a quick start user's guide posted right here. So many of the steps that I take you through today, so that you can see them, you can go through this little handy-dandy 5-step process to take you through step by step what you do to complete a sheet and how to fill out the different pages for the different activities. So if you want to follow along, you can put that up on another screen. I'm going to now just show you what it feels like when you get that mail message back from me, your account is turned on, then you just log in with the email that you sent to me, and you will set up your own password. I'm an admin user, so I see a couple extra screens more than you will, but let's see if I have this great big box in the middle of my screen. There we go. So I am able to see, and all of the other adjudicators that work in the background are able to see all of the different forms that are submitted by users as you go through and do this. This is how we actually see when you've completed your form. It comes into a submitted status. But as a regular user, you have the ability to create a form, and you pick which domain. We're working on right now food insecurity, but if you want to get started with either of the other ones, although we'll be serially going through here, you can at any point in time do your entry of these concepts that you need to be able to document in any of the spaces. Let's say you're going to do food security. I started a sheet, a submission of that type, so I could have a little bit to show you up front. It's a step-by-step form-based version of the Excel spreadsheet. So right now I'm just in review mode, and I'm showing you what it looks like after you have entered. So this is sort of the end product. You get to taste the cake before I show you how to bake it. This is an example where I've entered a screening question and answer pair. Here's the question. It says, within the past 12 months, it looks like I have a typo. Were you worried, we worried whether or not our food would run out before we got money to buy more. That's the question. This is a question that comes from the Hunger Vital Sign Screening Tool. It is a standardized, validated question. There aren't any specific instructions that go along with it. There's some supporting evidence that gives the background on this assessment tool. I have, in this case, they had some standardization to the point where a panel code had been defined for the screening tool in LOINC. And here are the answers. Often true, sometimes true, never true, don't know, refused. Did I double? I might have double entered that. Sorry about that. Let me show you what it looks like to edit these things, and then I can fix what the problem I just saw. So when you're doing entry to put this in, you're basically just have a form where you can create the question right here. The fields that are required to be populated have the little red asterisk right there, so you do need to enter some sort of a name of the screening tool. You see the little tool tip that shows up right underneath when I'm hovering in the screen that helps you understand what you're filling in. In the case of whether or not that screening tool is standardized, what that means is that a screening question is considered standardized if the question is always asked in a consistent way and responses are applied uniformly when completing the assessment. So there's tool tips to help you through answering places. There's drop downs whenever that is helpful to have a drop down list. And for your supporting evidence, we allow you to include a URL. So you can just, like if the background for this was a form that's available online, so I just gave the URL to that, or if you need to, you can upload a file from your hard drive. I put an example on here that, you can just upload like something from your desktop that you may have. If it's not as standardized thing, you just scoot around to, I forget which one I brought down in here to use as the example. But what was it? I help questions. That was one I was going to do as an example. But you can just upload a file like that to include along with it. And you don't have to know codes already. This is something that the adjudication team is taking care of in the background. But if you do, you have the opportunity to put a code that is associated either with a panel, that's the whole set of the questions that are in the screening tool, or you can just go ahead and include your answers. Right here, I added the answer often true. You can add a code if you want, if you know what it is. You might know it in SNOMED CT or you might know it in LOINC, but again, adding codes is optional, not required. You just want to get that concept of what it is that we need to document. That's the part that you need to type in. So here I've added often true, sometimes true, never true, don't know, refused. This one was that duplicate that I saw, and sometimes true, I had already done that, and never true, I had already done that one. So I fixed up my first question here. This is how I would want that to be presented, and if I can always press save to make sure that it's saved, and if I want to add another question, I just carry on, press the add a question, and away I go to make another question. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have a level of complexity that allows you to just sort of enter a single screening tool and then multiple questions underneath that tool. So you do need to repeat for each question which screening tool it's coming from and how to classify that. That's something we're looking at maybe simplifying in the future, but for now that would be duplicated if you're adding multiple questions from the same screening tool. But let's say I wanted to put in like that question. I'll just show you the I help one. I used the Excel spreadsheet to make it easier a little bit to get started, so I don't have to retype here. But let's say this is I help, and it is, let's say it's standardized but not validated. No additional instructions to go along with when to ask that question or who to apply it to or anything like that. The supporting evidence, that was where I showed you uploading a file. that's the background about these questions, where they come from, and there isn't a panel already associated with it. And let's just say that the answer is just simply, based on this question, it's like yes or no. So, and I don't even necessarily have to know if there's codes for that yet. Add another answer, no, and then save that. And now I have added two example data elements that come in this screening question area. The form for screening questions is set up in those question-answer pairs. It's the only form where that's the structure of the data element. But now you can see that there's two questions, what the various answers are. That would be ready to go for review. Let's look at the other forms just so that you'll have a chance to familiarize. These are, I think, a little bit simpler. Diagnoses or assessed needs. Here, what you'll just be doing is, again, entering a description of what is this vocabulary that you need to document, that you want a code, a clear and consistent code for using. So I just filled in food insecurity. I didn't have any supporting evidence behind that, but this was a case where I happened to know that we had some ICD-10 codes associated with this, and this just shows you that the tool is sophisticated enough that if you do know codes for a concept, you can add a specific code, or you can add even a more general code, even a more specific code. So you really have the ability, if you have a sort of a set of codes that you use to represent this concept, you can add more, and they don't have to be just from ICD-10. In this area of this type of information, you can also use SNOMED CT to represent the diagnoses or assessed needs. So you could enter a SNOMED code if you knew how you wanted that concept represented in SNOMED. We do not ask you to type the display name out for these codes. We'll look those up and make sure that we get them right. You just really need to put the code in. That's indicative enough. So it's a couple examples. Another diagnosed need might be food insecurity or being underweight. This was a case where we had a SNOMED code for that. I added those in. Simpler than the Q&A part. For adding goals, again, it's very basic. What is the concept that you want to represent? This is an example of a goal that is food security as a goal, or food insecurity screened and intervened. That might be the goal. So you really just have to think about how would you articulate or state a goal, how would you want to document a goal, and put that concept right in there, and then we will handle the adjudication that goes along with it. Put a couple of them in for examples. And finally, we'll look at the interventions page. This is the same simple thing. It's just the space that we're collecting are terms that are actions or activities that actually get done. So these are not noun things. These are verb things, stuff that you do. You might plan for it to be done. You could order it. You could refer to have this activity happen, or you could do this activity, therefore completing something that was referred to be done. So we're really trying to develop the full vocabulary that's needed to describe both interventions that get planned and interventions that get completed. You remember our use case. Somebody asked the question earlier, how do these tie back to the use cases? Well, if we want to be able to do use case number 2, where we're tracking to completion interventions that are ordered or referred, this is the full vocabulary that we need to record and say the kinds of interventions that we think we will be ordering or referring or planning to have done, as well as the interventions that will actually get done to complete that activity. So I just put a couple examples in: case management, nutrition care, food provision. You'll see here that in some cases I added a SNOMED code. In some cases, you could have put in CPT or HCPCS codes, But again, the important thing is what we're really focused on are the concepts themselves. The descriptive text that you type in here is giving us the term that we're going to need, and that's the number one priority. That's why it's a required field. I'm going to go back and review my submission. You'll see here that I put in my couple of screening questions, some diagnoses that would be needed or assessed needs that would be needed, goals, and interventions that might either be planned or completed. And away you go. You just submit your form, and that completes it. It will show up on our dashboard as a completed form, and you're in business. At that point, our adjudication process starts. We will create a sort of a copy of this downloaded spreadsheet and begin to adjudicate it row by row and get back to you with our findings, the subject matter experts' findings on if it's adding to the master, duplicating something on the master, or something that may be considered for the future or not at all at this time. I think that's everything I needed to cover. I've showed you how to get started. Use the Confluence site to get that email, send a message with this information, and that's the first step. I'll send you the turn on link, and away you go. I'll take questions, I guess, Evelyn, unless you want to finish another couple of slides before we do another question break.
No, this is great. Thank you, Lisa. We've got several questions. So I think, Lynette, if you're organizing, we did have one.
Yes, I can help. I've been tracking. Teresa Gerard was asking or saying, suggest you add the additional ICD-11 codes to the crosswalk as well as detail from the upcoming 2020 ICD-10 CM coding guidelines.
Evelyn, do you want to handle that question about ICD-11 or? We had this discussion. Someone had raised this up previously. So for us, I think just to acknowledge, I know my understanding, if I recall, and I know Sarah, there was going back and forth about some of these not being implemented yet. So for us, it's sort of figuring out if you are currently using, we want you to submit concepts that you are using or you plan to use. And if you know of a code or you want to use that code, you can list it here. But our understanding is they're not live yet unless somebody else has further information.
Okay, thanks, Evelyn. And Ruth Weta is asking, Lisa, are you considering reliability as a criterion in addition to validity?
Reliability of the criterion. Could you maybe unmute that person and let them explain the question a little bit more?
Ruth, let me find you here. Here you are.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa.
Okay, Ruth, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is Ruth. And no, I'm just wondering, I mean, validity is one aspect to judge a tool instrument, but the reliability analyses kind of gets at how well does it measure each time it's administered. So it might be worthwhile.
I understand that. Yes, I understand better now. I think the field that our experts gave us around that is this notion of whether or not the screening tool had been validated. And I didn't hover over that. Field. But the validation means that it's been verified by an outside organization to determine that it is significant, and Laura maybe can help with some of the terminology there, but that the assessment tool itself has gone through a scientific process to be determined that it is valid. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's what that question gets at.
I mean, I actually, it's an important question because I actually suggested we take that out since almost none of the tools have been validated. I mean, I technically validated. So I think most of the answers will be, we don't know, or, I mean, only the Hunger Vital sign actually, to my mind, really meets that bar. So this is the question that I sent to you, Lisa, separately. So this question of standardized and both the questions about standardized and validated, I think we may need to give some more drop-down options there, but I think we may want to add, I don't know, or validated, it means so many different things.
Right. No, and I would agree with that, Laura. I think that's a good recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Lucy Johns is asking, would you consider, quote, policy change, unquote, or, quote, policy promotion, unquote, to be an intervention?
I would say submit it and let's give it a try. You know, get it in on the list there, and that's the whole point, is to put it up in front of the community and see what happens.
I would add, I mean, I think there's no harm in submitting it, but just remembering our scope of practice. So this is about clinical documentation capacity. So if this is about work that's being done at the clinical level related to social risk factors. So I 100% agree that there are policy level activities that could be part of a health systems engagement in this area, but I don't think that is typically part of clinical documentation. But by all means, like Lucy, I don't think there's any reason not to submit that and have the group discuss it. But I would just say in terms of our scope, we're really focused on clinical activities.
Thanks, Laura and Lisa. And this question is from Jeffrey Green asking, would Ayers taxonomy be a possible code in this model, maybe for interventions?
We did not consider code systems that are outside of what has been approved by the Interoperability Standards Advisory 2019. So right now for U.S. national standards, there's an advisory that is produced by the Office of the National Coordinator that sort of directs people in terms of what vocabularies and code systems are considered ideal for supporting interoperability. And if because that was not a code system that's listed on that list, we did not include it.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. And then last question on our list is from Kim, asking, if a question always asked and reported as a specific value, for example, for state reporting requirements, but may map to a different wording for the question, is that considered standardized or not? Because it can be asked in different ways.
So I think that would not be considered standardized if it's asked in different ways. The tool tip, if I go back to that, the tool tip says that it's considered standardized if, let's see, what did I do? It's considered standardized if the question is always asked in the same way. That is, what's the best way to?
Lisa, can I just ask, is there a way that we could link the definitions here? Because I think the people who are listening to the call, this is super helpful, but there will be people probably who missed this call or won't hear this part of the call, and it would be super helpful to have that be available, that definition be available on or linkable on the form. Is that possible?
Right now it's just a tool tip that comes up when you hover over it, but I could look at how to make that more obvious. Right now, if you just hover over top of that, it says what the definition is right underneath, but I could ask about having it imprinted indelibly on the form rather than just coming up as a tool tip.
Yeah, I mean, now that you do that, it's a little clearer, but even maybe making it bigger for those of us who can't read that.
Sure. I can work on both of those things. Larger AARP font size, and and maybe if we could even include it, just words over in here. I don't know, as long as I can fit them both and not make the form look really ugly, or maybe right underneath it, something like that. I'll look at how else I can include the definition better. Sure thing. And I just will say this contact us button right here also brings up a mail message that comes straight into the, oh, don't fail me now, but it's supposed to come straight into creating a mail. Here we go. Came up on the other screen. A mail message that you can easily just send me feedback to. So if you're using the tool and there's something that you find that's hard or you have a good idea about it, you can just hit that contact us and it will send a mail message right along to gather your feedback that way too.
Thanks, Lisa. This is Evelyn. I know we've got 4 minutes left, so I did want to just take our last 4 minutes, acknowledge where we are with the end-to-end review, but I do want to double check. I think we have one more question. This is really important, so I also want to make sure everybody can ask Lisa questions. You know, this is also a new tool for us to be using, so we appreciate there may be some kinks, and we appreciate your feedback. And as Lisa noted, there's an opportunity for you to submit your comment or question. If not, always reach back to the Gravity inbox or reach out to Lynette directly. Oh, okay. So I have Terry had a question. So Terry's asking, are we interested in the downstream effects of food insecurity on specific conditions such as pregnancy, hypertension, congestion failure? If so, are we thinking about how to link diagnoses with food insecurity given likely impact on interventions? Or is this one step too far? Lisa, do you want to answer that? And maybe at the same time, I could take presenter Rice back.
My sense is it's a step a little bit further. We have alluded to the fact that these codes eventually will be used inside templates like Care Plan, the Care Plan Fire Resource, and the CCDA Care Plan template. And those templates, the structures, are set up to be able to link things together, diagnoses with other needs, et cetera. So I think that the place where those linkages will end up coming in are with the structures that exist already in some of the fire resources and CDA templates that we have.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so with 2 minutes left, so this is Evelyn. I'm taking us back to the end-to-end review comments and dispositions. At this time, I won't share. I just want to acknowledge that we have received comments. So thank you very much to those that did send them in earlier. I know we got some comments today as well. We're still consolidating those. Overall, the comments received, we have accepted them. So I just want to acknowledge that if you submitted a comment, we've agreed and incorporated. Some of the comments, I think, just to acknowledge, Lori sent us some comments in regards to, slightly updating the patient story to reflect the role of the front clinical or front staff member. So we added a new persona name for them, so I actually gave them a name because she noted that that role is very important in clinical settings right now, so distinct from the clinical staff member. And then, of course, Laurie had some additional tweaks throughout. The other one that came back that was very important, reflective of our use case 3, and we didn't catch the name, so the name wasn't evident on the submission, but I do want to take some time to acknowledge that there was a comment in regards to the actual documenting. So we, instead of just documenting the patient story during the last encounter when Rebecca returned to see Dr. Sanchez, there was a note that she feels better, right, and that she completed her goal. So the comment received was, we really should acknowledge that there was actual change in her health status. So, for example, after 3 months, because she had interventions in regards to finding healthier foods, she changed her asthma medication, that we actually note the documentation, that there is an evaluation of her health status, and there's a lung function test, for example. There's a way that Dr. Sanchez can actually evaluate her and document in the care plan that there has been improvement. So we did make those changes. You'll see that in the final document. So with that, we're at the end of our time. I want to acknowledge our end-to-end homework. As Lynette said, you have until tomorrow. If you need more time, please let us know. We are not, unlike other initiatives where we really can't move on to the next phase until we finish use case, not the case for us here. We do have time. So if you do need it and we feel we could use more comments, we will extend the end-to-end comment period, and we could also extend the use case voting. So please keep that in mind. So again, highlighted here, we can be fluid in publishing the use case for voting and extending that for a longer time. And just a note too, if we're keeping to our schedule, we do want for food insecurity, the August 1st deadline is just for the food insecurity data elements because we want to have enough time to review those with the community. So with that, I'll stop. Any last minute questions for me to address or for the team? I don't see any more chat here. Okay, or anybody want to verbally say anything before we adjourn? No? All right. Okay, with that, then thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, Laura, and Lynette for presenting earlier on, and we appreciate all you coming back today after a long weekend. So thank you very much. We'll talk to you all next week for Food and Security Kickoff. Bye, everyone.